Donald Trump is in Asia, but there's big news here at home. NBC News has learned from multiple sources that federal investigators have enough evidence to bring charges in the investigation of Trump's former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, and his son. Earlier, Trump spoke to U.S. troops at an air base in Japan, the first stop on his 12-day, five-nation trip across Asia. Escalating tensions over North Korea's nuclear program, as well as trade, not to mention Russia, are expected to dominate the agenda as Trump visits Japan, South Korea, China, Vietnam, and the Philippines. And while Trump may hope to shift attention away from Russiagate while overseas, he apparently plans to meet with Russian leader Vladimir Putin in Vietnam later this week. And joining me now, former State Department spokesperson Nayyera. Max Boot is back with me, and Washington Post opinion writer Jennifer Rubin also joined. Thank you all for being here. Nayyera, the last time Donald Trump was traveling, and this was his trip to Europe last year in July, he found himself dictating talking points aboard Air Force One as he was leaving Germany to come back about a certain Trump Tower meeting, a June 2016 Trump Tower meeting where his son, Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort attended with Russian officials talking about getting dirt on Hillary Clinton. So these foreign policy trips have a way of being interrupted by Russiagate. What do you suspect is going on aboard Air Force One in the conversations that the State Department folks would be having as they're giving him this news we just learned from NBC News?
And this is, I call it the three Ps. There's the psychology, the policy, and the politics. And Donald Trump's psychology does not allow him to focus on policy on a regular good day, which is why the State Department officials struggle to keep up and try to keep it on track.
Yep.
This is part of why we don't have any deal announcements coming on this trip. This trip is likely to end up being a learning and a hand-holding experience for Donald Trump.
Yep.
He's not going to be able to deliver on the idea of any trade negotiations or real jobs. That's the policy side. His psychology on the politics front is going to set him any deals sideways.
Yep.
Because he's going to clearly want to get hands-on involved in any of the management and strategy. We already know that he's had trouble with his lawyers, and Jared has had trouble with the lawyers because Donald wants to get directly involved in the legal strategy. So anytime something pops up, he's going to want to get directly involved to the distraction of anything else happening productive for the country on this trip. Knowing that he's meeting with Putin and with Duterte in the Philippines towards the end of his trip is actually going to embolden him when he comes back to the U.S. because Putin is going to try to work this to his advantage, prop him up, make him feel very good about having control in his country, and give him, frankly, talking points and a plan of how to be an autocratic leader. Same thing with Duterte. He came up in his country as a Democratic elected official who also had campaign-style rallies speaking about law enforcement being strong. He is now the head of a program that has killed thousands of people outside of the judicial system in his country. These are the types of things Donald Trump will hear before he comes back to deal with the American people on Russia.
Well, that's some context for you. Jennifer, let's listen to Donald Trump because the other context of this is that Donald Trump does not have exactly a fully robust State Department. He's on this world trip, but not only is the State Department really been gutted by his Secretary of State, a lot of seats unfilled, Donald Trump doesn't seem to even see that as a problem. He sees himself as his own chief diplomat. This is Donald Trump on Laura Ingram's show earlier this week about the unfilled State Department slots.
And there is a concern that the State Department currently is undermining our agenda.
So we don't need all the people that they want. You know, don't forget, I'm a business person, and I tell my people, well, you don't need to fill slots, don't fill them. But we have some people that I'm not happy with their
But Assistant
process.
Secretary of State, you're not getting rid of that position.
But let me tell you, the one that matters is me. I'm the only one that matters, because when it comes to it, that's what the policy is going to be.
Jennifer, so much to unpack there. First of all, the question from Laura Ingraham, is the State Department undermining his agenda? They're the ones trying to prevent war with North Korea, what few of them there are. And Donald Trump saying it doesn't even matter if there aren't anybody, if there isn't anyone there, because he's the only one that matters. Your thoughts?
Oh, gosh, where to begin? Yes, first of all, he is very hampered because he doesn't have key people in place like the ambassador to South Korea. Secondly, he's hampered because he doesn't know anything. You could say, well, Richard Nixon maybe didn't need people because he knew a lot about the world. Donald Trump knows nothing about the world. And you're right, and Nayyera is correct, that Trump is not going to be able to resist commenting on the latest information. Remember, we left off last week, as Congressman Lieu reminded us, with Trump essentially cajoling, ordering, encouraging his State Department, his Judicial Department, rather, and the FBI to go after his political enemies, to go after Hillary Clinton, which I do believe is an impeachable offense. So with this now now coming, he certainly is going to begin haranguing the special prosecutor. He certainly is going to be bringing up Hillary Clinton again. I can imagine there's a mad scramble to try to get his phone away from him, but that doesn't seem to work. He always gets access to it. And at this point, you have to believe that the hooks are into Michael Flynn. He may not have a deal, but by threatening to indict his son, they are squeezing Michael Flynn. There is no separation between Michael Flynn and President Trump. There's no separation between Michael Flynn and the Attorney General. So the walls are closing in. He's at a trip where he is ill-prepared. He's not going to have deliverables. He's going to have people testing him. He's going to have people provoking him. And what is he going to do? He's going to turn around and lash out at his domestic enemies. Usually presidents traveling overseas are able to regain some confidence, some prestige, because they're seen on the world stage. Donald Trump, I suspect, is going to come back weaker than when he left.
Yeah, and I think, Max, that was sort of the idea, right, is that when they send Donald Trump overseas, it is an opportunity for him to sort of acquire that kind of presidential patina that he is unable to acquire at home. But this was Donald Trump before news may have gotten to him. And again, for those who are just tuning in, the NBC News reporting that federal investigators have gathered enough evidence to bring charges in their investigation against Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor. He'd be the highest level official in the Trump campaign to face such indictment if it happens. And we should note this is not confirmed by Robert Mueller's office. This is NBC's reporting about Michael Flynn and his son. But this was Donald Trump's sort of cant before anything like this dropped. This is Donald Trump talking about North Korea.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
The United States has great strength and patience. But if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea.
And by the way, Rocket Man should have been handled a long time ago.
And really quickly, this is H.R. McMaster, the national security advisor, who was asked on Thursday if Trump would tone down his rhetoric. And this is before any breaking news, whether he would tone it down.
So the president will use whatever language he wants to use, obviously.
So we shouldn't expect any modulation in the language because of where he is?
Well, I don't think the president really modulates his language. Have you noticed him do that?
Max, I wonder if you could just use your lurid imagination to wonder what is sort of the anti-modulation we can expect now.
Well, I mean, as you were showing, Joy, even in the best of times, Donald Trump sounds pretty deranged. So you can imagine when you turn the pressure up a few notches, what happens at that point. Anything can happen. Now, I think what he has going for him on this trip is the fact that all of the leaders that he's meeting with have an institutional interest in basically shielding him from public scrutiny, propping him up, trying to ingratiate themselves in the way that Shinzo Abe has done fairly skillfully over the last year. So all of them are basically going to make Trump look good. The problem that comes in there is if he's in a press conference, if he has any kind of unscripted occasion where he actually gets to talk off the cuff, all bets are off because you don't know what's going to come out of his mouth. He could, wind up attacking the U.S.-South Korea trade deal. He could make more, lunatic threats against North Korea that will ratchet up tensions and increase the risk of nuclear war. You just don't know what he's going to be up to. But certainly the fact that he's been so distracted. I mean, even going out on this trip, he was tweeting about Hillary Clinton and this phony uranium scandal and all. I mean, that's where his head is at. He knows, as Jennifer said, he knows nothing about the issues. He knows nothing about the countries, and he's focused on his own political turmoil at home, which is also decreasing his credibility abroad to the extent that he has any credibility to begin with. So, bottom line here, Joy, is, I mean, he is. I am embarrassed to see this man as our president, but I am doubly embarrassed when he is abroad representing our country because he has no idea of how to do that and how to behave in a remotely presidential fashion.
Yeah, and there's a new Washington Post ABC poll that shows just dismal numbers across the board, but whether or not Americans trust Trump to act responsibly on North Korea, only 32% say that they do. I wonder in terms of speaking erratically, Nayyera, you already have had, Max mentioned Shinzo Abe. You already had Donald Trump, according to the Japan Times newspaper, make comments that he couldn't understand why a country of samurai warriors didn't shoot down North Korean missiles. So he's already made that gaffe per the papers that Shinzo Abe might be reading. You already have reporting that China has already essentially won in this Trump era. It has increased China's leverage and power. you know, it does seem to be that at this point, China sort of has the whip hand over whatever happens in this region going forward because Trump is president.
China is absolutely going to exploit this opportunity, not just of Trump being overseas and uninformed about how the region works and the history there, but also that he will be distracted politically. There are several things that China wants right now. They want U.S. troops out of South Korea. They want to not be prosecuted for theft of intellectual property here in the United States. And they want business. They want to be able to get the contracts to be able to rebuild American roads and infrastructure. They are likely to be able to get most of that because Donald Trump is going to be distracted by his meetings with Putin, and the Chinese are going to wine and dine him the same way they did the Saudis. Foreign leaders understand the psychology of our president just as well as we do because they see it on display on the news and on Twitter. They know avoid any of the staff because they don't matter anymore. It is all about getting directly to the guy. It is not by accident that Shinzo Abe spent half a day golfing with Donald Trump because that is far more productive for reaching their goals, having fancy dinners and a state dinner, far more productive than actually having a business or policy conversation.
And especially given that his State Department has no teeth, essentially, and no personnel. You know, Jennifer, and I've talked to Max about this, too. I'm going to ask both of you about it. I'm going to start with you. This concept of American weakness is something that, you know, I think we've talked about it before and the consequences of it. And I think that for Americans who may not pay as much attention to foreign policy, you know, if you could sort of explain why this even matters. Like, if you're home in Sheboygan, why does it matter if the American president appears weak on the world stage?
You know, since World War II, the United States has been the superpower that has really held the international economic and political system together. We've not had a world war, at least not yet, thank goodness. We've had a system of trade. We've had the expansion of democracies and capitalism. We did not see Europe sink into communism or fascism after World War II. And that's largely because of the United States, that we've knitted together these alliances, that we have set certain rules of the road in trade, in international behavior. And when we don't play that role, when we seem to be cheering on the rogue states, when we give a high five to the president of the Philippines who's engaged in extrajudicial killings, that system begins to fray and fall apart. And the result will be more conflict. The result will be trade problems for the American business community, and it will be a diminution of the values that we hold dear: human rights, democracy. And I must say that for Donald Trump going overseas, remember, I'm old enough to remember when he said he was going to make the best deals and everybody else was a moron, that he was going to be the one to make the best deals. He makes the worst deals because all you have to do is butter him up, literally roll out a red carpet, and he'll give you what you want. So I imagine that the Chinese are licking their chops, at least figuratively, thinking what they can get out of this guy and how they can take him for a ride.
Yeah, and how much damage is done when you have the American president, Max, facing the prospect, the potential for his former national security advisor to be indicted for having done business with the regime in Turkey to try to essentially kidnap a man living in the United States, doing charter schools, to ship him back to Turkey to an autocrat. I mean, I just wonder, from the point of view of those who are watching foreign policy from abroad, what must they be thinking?
Well, this is completely undermining everything that the United States has stood for more than 70 years, because we consistently go around the world telling other countries that they need to have a free press, they need to have accountability, they need to decrease corruption, they need to have the rule of law. And all those things Trump is undermining at home. I mean, how can you look with a straight face at somebody like Xi Jinping and say to him, you know, don't use the Chinese legal system to go after your political opponents, when that's exactly what Trump is proposing to do right here at home?
Yeah.
I mean, this is everything that the United States has stood for, Donald Trump is opposed to. And I truly fear the long-term consequences of this, because I think it is leading to a loss of American credibility, a loss of American moral authority. And at the end of the day, I don't think that our Democratic allies can really trust this anymore. I mean, I was just looking at a poll here which shows that the popularity of the U.S. president is down to 17% in South Korea, 24% in Japan, from highs of over 80% under President Obama. If that continues, it does long-term damage to the U.S. position in the world, and that damages our security and our economy.
Yeah, at the risk of ruining everybody's Sunday, given the breaking news, I'm just going to ask if our guests can just hang around just for a little bit longer. We're going to try to bring you guys back if you can stay. So everybody hopefully stay nearby. Coming up.